afternoon. Just to say, during the workshop, please send in your questions via the chat function, and we'll take them during Q&A after the speakers have presented. We are recording this session, for just so you know. The workshop has been sponsored by Arrow. Gary Hill is Arrow's Regional Sales Manager in Ireland, and I would like to hand over to Gary now to introduce the speakers. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Kevin. And it's a pleasure to welcome you all here to the second of our series of workshops here today. And it's a pleasure to welcome the Intel team, our partners Intel, joining us in this workshop. So it was referred to earlier that data is the new oil. And Intel's direction is very much about managing data and helping the world interact with that data and making sense of it. So we're looking forward to a good interactive session here with Colin and the team. Intel is no stranger to Ireland, as you know. They employ over 4,500 people, which is incredible. So it's great to have that link from our own shores into the global world of technology. So I'll hand you over to Colin, who is the sales director for EMEA for Intel Partner Programs, and he works closely with us in Arrow and other partners as well. And Colin will be joined by Andy Smith, who works with us in Arrow. He leads our EMEA marketing program for alliances in OT. So without any more ado, I'll hand over to Colin and team. Thank you.
Thanks, Gary. Appreciate it. I'll just get it set up here now and share. But I'm delighted to be able to support the event with you today. So let's just give us 1 second now. Sorry, now 1 moment. Of course, you practice this and it works fine, and then you go to do it live and it's always a bit different. So bear with me 1 moment.
No problem, take your time. So it looks like there's about 25 of us on the call here. So the hope is that we make this as kind of an informal and interactive. So feel free, Kevin will explain, to write your questions in the text, and so that we can answer any questions as we go through or at the end of the session.
Super. Okay. Well, I'm going to do a bit of risk taking. See, can we share a video to start off? Hopefully you can see my screen in full screen now. Yeah. Okay. Great stuff.
Living on the edge. For some, it's a phrase that conjures up an uncomfortable sense of risk and uncertainty. For others, it represents the only sure path to experience life's full potential. But when it comes to the impact of artificial intelligence on the future of IoT, there's really only one way to look at it. The edge is where the action is. It's the edge where unprecedented amounts of data will not only be generated and collected, but where the critical decisions directing autonomous vehicles and devices must be determined in a matter of milliseconds. Where businesses and enterprises worldwide will seek to carve out their own unique competitive advantages with the power of data. And while the immense value of the data center will continue to grow for decades to come, many of AI's most promising contributions to the IoT revolution will require the development and distribution of specialized compute resources. Resources designed to enable an exciting new era of opportunity and growth for businesses everywhere, and built right into the farthest reaches of the network and its ever-expanding edge. Which is exactly why you can find Intel there today.
Super. Thanks, everybody, and appreciate you all joining our session this afternoon. Beyond IoT, what I'd like to title this is collaborating for success. And this morning I was part of another panel alongside Arrow and Microsoft, and it was very engaging to see the questions and the dialogue that was happening as a result of the interaction. So as Gary said, really important for you to share any questions that you might have as we go through the next 45 minutes or so. So again, thanks for joining. I suppose I have the pleasure of representing Intel in Ireland, and it is a pleasure. Gary mentioned that we have over 4,500 staff based here, and being the only salesperson who's actually based on our manufacturing campus and get to see what we enable on a daily basis under normal circumstances when they let me in. It's just truly amazing, what we get to make and what's produced and the innovation and activity that's happening out of our Leixlip campus. I get to represent the EMEA territory. So, have a team of people that work right across the region. So right from Stockholm in Sweden all the way down to Johannesburg in South Africa. So this has been a massive change for me. Ordinarily, I'd be on a plane every week and traveling the region to visit our customers and visit my colleagues and team members. But clearly, that's been a very different situation over the course of the last year. So moving along, really, what we thought we'd touch on today is in terms of my talk. We talked about, well, what is IoT doing and how is it transforming the way we live? What is Intel doing and kind of how can we take advantage? But we're also going to hear from Andy, and he's going to chat to us after my talk, and then we're going to get into a panel discussion. So we're trying to make it as interactive as possible and engage along the journey. So just before we get into it, what I wanted to do is kind of share what is Intel's purpose. What are we looking at? And really, we're looking to create world-changing technology that enriches the lives of every person on the earth. And when people see that for the first time, they think, well, that's quite a lofty ambition, and it's quite a strong statement in terms of what our purpose is. But I actually, if I bring that down to brass tacks and what we've actually done and deliver, and how it is enabling people today to enrich their lives, I think about what we're doing with children in education, and how people are actually educating, and their children are actually at home at the moment in these COVID times and still able to continue with their education and drive that. I mean, I have 3 of my daughters inside in the house right now. Hopefully the Zoom doesn't go down, and they're all doing their online classes as we speak. If I think about what's happening from perhaps a healthcare environment and remote patient monitoring, that's a critical aspect of what's going on in the world right now. And maybe just another quick example would be, logistics and what we're enabling around logistics in terms of whether it be healthcare supplies or food supplies getting to the right places at the right times. They're critical items that we are actually contributing to every day of the week. So I think they're important pieces. If we think about IoT and think about transforming the way we live and work, I think everybody on the call has experienced significant change over the course of the last year. We're all doing things differently, whether that's online shopping, whether it's the learning at home, whether it's the working at home, combination of many other things. We probably have all experienced the Microsoft Team or Zoom calls to family for quizzes, etc., to keep that connectivity together, to connect togetherness of our families in as best we can. But I think there's numerous examples on the chart here in terms of if we look at crops and the growing of yields, if we think about lowering overall costs and driving efficiency, they're critical pieces. But just a couple of statistics, over 200% of the growth of information-based products and services, by next year, that's a significant percentage in growth. So over 200%. We're seeing that approximately 55% of all data is forecasted to come and be generated by IoT in 2025. That's only a couple of years away. I suppose if we think about perhaps looking back a decade ago, we might have had a small number of devices in our homes, maybe a desktop, maybe a PC. Now, if you look at the amount of devices that are connected in your home, it's a significant number. So you might have, I think I last counted over 40 devices, and that's probably a conservative estimate in the house, between phones, between laptops, between tablets, but also about, for me, I would have an alarm system that's connected to the internet. I'm now able through, through a heating system to be able to turn on and off the heating system remotely and see what the temperature of the house is if I'm outside. So, there's a lot more that's actually been brought to life and that we're all being able to take advantage of as individuals. If we think about COVID for a second, and we're all starting to think ahead with respect to post-COVID, and we're all looking forward to that time when we can start, perhaps going back to some kind of normality with respect to where we have been over the last year. But what have we been able to do, and what have we been accelerating through this transformation? Well, I think for most people, we're looking at how do we enable economies to restart, to reboot? How do we help companies restart? How do we do that remote patient monitoring and make sure that we don't have inertia of patients once COVID stops, or once we think we get into an environment where we can get out and about, that patients just flock back to GP practice rooms rather than actually taking advantage of the actual remote infrastructure first. I think we've probably experienced traffic light systems in retail stores going in for groceries to see, is it okay to actually enter the building? Is it okay? Is there the right number of people in there? So you're getting green to go or red to perhaps pause until somebody comes out of that room. So there's many different examples of what COVID is accelerating from a digital transformation point of view. I would say it's also significant, business opportunity. It's estimated that, this year, 2021, it's estimated that the market is worth about $300 billion. So it's a significant market opportunity, and a significant opportunity for us to take advantage of as a collective audience. Whether you're a consumer, whether you're a business owner, whether you're a startup, or whether you're an innovator with a new idea. I think when we look at Intel and what we're doing, well, clearly we're trying to provide the different ingredients and solutions to actually enable that value chain. On this side, the things and devices, right from the left-hand side to the right-hand side where we have the data center. But we need all the devices and all the ingredients right the way through the supply chain. But we also have to be situational. So for example, if we're in an autonomous car, it's really critically important that the device at the edge has the compute power to be able to make the decision at the edge and not have to wait and perhaps have the latency and connectivity issue to go back to the cloud and back to the car. We need that real-time decision to be made, perhaps to offset an accident or an issue that you might have. So, certain critical things need to happen, and the compute power needs to be at the edge. And then for some items, it's possible to take advantage of the cloud. But all of the ingredients are critically important. So we need the different pieces to work together. I would say that 5G is becoming a critical ingredient in enabling that connectivity of those edge devices, and I think you'll see more and more of that as we go through this year. AI is mentioned here. We're think about the theme of the conference and the event today. It's about beyond IoT, and I think IoT and the data that it's creating is enabling AI, and for us to get the insights to make better decisions and get better outcomes for individuals and for businesses. So I think they're all kind of enabling and major accelerants, as it says in the slide, for that business transformation. If we move on to that AI and why AI now, well, clearly, we've talked briefly about the the amount of data that's being created. And if you just look on the left-hand side of the page and you look at how much data is being created by individuals, by cars, by hospitals, by factories, etc., just gives you some examples of what's being created. I think we all probably struggle with, you know, how do we kind of continue to maintain the amount of data that we have, you know, on a personal basis, managing the photograph portfolios that we might have that we're trying to host in different places. But, you know, not just photograph, but video obviously is a critical element of driving that user space up. But, you know, on the bottom left-hand corner, we're talking about, well, actually, we're looking at hindsight. So we're looking at, you know, now that we have that data, how do we go back and actually, you know, take advantage of it? But really how we try and drive and use AI and move it up the curve so that we can get insights, and then, you know, further on that we can get foresights and then actually adapt real time to that change and to that data so that we can, you know, adapt and benefit from it. But, you know, there's a huge opportunity for companies, and we've seen this with major companies, to monetize the data that they already have. And, you know, Gary mentioned at the start that kind of the data being the new oil. So, you know, every new IoT device that we add on is creating new data, is creating new opportunity for people to perhaps come up with a new innovative idea or a new company to address a specific business need that's out there. So there's kind of a treasure trove of valuable insights, you know, that are there. One of the things that we talked about this morning is that security needs to be a foundation, needs to be a critical horizontal pillar that underpins everything. And we need to make sure that we're taking advantage of the solutions that are out there to make sure that we're doing this in a secure way. Because we don't want, you know, perhaps a temperature sensor, the example that was mentioned this morning, being compromised, because it's not about that IoT device itself, but perhaps it's where that gets to with regard to the network that it's connected, the operating system to the computer that it might be connected to, etc. So, you know, security is a critical piece of the puzzle when you're looking at the infrastructure that you deploy and how you go about delivering your solution. If we think about, you know, AI solutions, you know, there are many different examples and many different areas in every market. There's a couple of them that are mentioned here, you know, but one I'd like to talk about, or perhaps one or two, is in the energy market. You know, we're probably quite familiar now in Ireland and across Europe in seeing wind farms and the turbines that are used for them. You know, they are very significant infrastructure costs. They're also very large in terms of their scale and size. So to physically, you know, stop one of those, to have somebody go and inspect it, is a very difficult thing. But if you can actually go while the turbine is not moving and actually have a drone camera go and inspect it and do exactly the same inspection loop every day, and have AI compare the differences that it's seeing, well, perhaps you can predict when you need to do maintenance and actually have that as a much more effective, efficient, and proactive way of actually going about and ensuring that you're doing the maintenance in a timely manner and you don't have a catastrophic failure in the context of a wind turbine. If I think about healthcare, and I'm sure Edwin will talk to us about this later on, but I think about healthcare, and we think about imaging and being able to actually compare images and actually do machine learning and take the image databases that we have of a particular clinical condition, then we can actually, you know, make, you know, perhaps references or make recommendations and actually highlight specific cases to clinicians earlier as a result of the learnings that are coming from AI. So I think there's many different areas, there's many different solutions, but this is where I think IoT is going beyond, and it's the data from IoT devices are enabling AI solutions and new insights to come as we deliver forward. I think if we think about, you know, video, I think video is the kind of ultimate IoT sensor. in terms of what we can do. We talked briefly about imaging from a healthcare point of view, but I think everybody can benefit from it. There's significant opportunities. Security is another one, but there's lots of different opportunities, and it's something that the opportunity around video can be monetized again and again and again, and there's so many different areas. I mean, I've talked about the drone camera, I've talked about the healthcare, and I'm sure we have other examples just coming up on the next slide. I'm sure the panel will talk about it later as well. But we have public safety, talked about that from a security point of view, or referenced it. Autonomous vehicles obviously need cameras to guide them as part of their overall solution. We think about industry in terms of actually inspecting devices. So inspecting a product to make sure that it meets the critical quality that you want to see. So there's many different aspects of what we do and what we actually enable and bring to the market. So I think that was the kind of the tee up to our general discussion. I think what I want to leave with is that we are working to transform the way we live. We are providing those ingredients to the solutions and working with the ecosystem to bring them about. And what I would advocate is, let's start small, start now, and take advantage of what IoT can enable for you. So let me pause there. Let me hand over to stop sharing and hand over to Andy, please.
Thank you, Colin. That was great. And let me just share my screen. Hopefully you can see that.
Perfect. Yeah, we can see it.
All right. So I'm with Arrow, a business unit called Arrow Services, and I'll explain how we fit into the Arrow family. And then I'm going to spend a few minutes just sharing with how we partner with Intel, and in particular around their Market Ready Solutions program, which is part of their IoT Solutions Alliance programs worldwide. So first of all, if I may, just a moment to explain the Arrow family a little, because if you've heard from Arrow today, there's a good chance you've heard from someone in the Arrow Components division. This is the part of Arrow, the biggest part of Arrow that serves customers that are designing and building electronics. And OEMs in that space, designing at chip level, and Arrow has a huge resource to help you design and build your products. And then at the bottom of this slide, you see the Enterprise Computing Solutions business, a very large part of Arrow that serves the IT industry as a distributor into the IT and enterprise space, cloud, infrastructure, and all the things you'd expect from the IT side of the house. And I sit in this smaller business unit. We're about a $1.5 billion business inside Arrow, so about 5% of Arrow's revenue today. And this is where we particularly work with Intel around the MRS, the Market Ready Solutions program. And our value proposition as Arrow Services is all about enabling customers' business growth by simplifying their technology lifecycle experience. So that's a way of saying that our job is to make our customers successful, get to market more quickly, and leverage technology that is complex. I just want to take a brief moment to take a sidestep. Intel and Arrow use this language of OT and IT, OT, operational technology. And in my experience, it's not familiar to everyone. So I just wanted to take a minute to explain what we mean by that and how it's relevant here. So I think everyone's familiar with the IT domain. It's about, IT is of course about enabling employees in the workplace. It's about managing the workplace experience around devices such as laptops, phones. It's about enterprise software in the cloud and on-premise and all the things we're familiar with. So it's people-centric, and it's about hopefully making us all productive when we're working from home or in the office. Operational technology, on the other hand, is more device-centric. It's more about the things that we all touch and use every day that are outside of that IT environment. And unless you're looking for these things, it's often easy to overlook just how much technology we interact with, not only in the home that Colin touched on, but in fact, as we go through our daily lives, whether it be in retail or transportation or healthcare environment. And those are the devices that we think about, particularly in the IoT side of the house. So I think you'll have seen a number of ways of explaining this complexity during the sessions today. And when we think about IoT, it's also about digital transformation. And in my experience, end customers, businesses that want to embark on a digital transformation journey, they need help. It's complex, okay? And so take this trivial example. To do something as simple as replacing a written receipt in a restaurant or a hotel with something that's more digital, you'd need to embark on a huge amount of development work around all of these themes and technologies. And if you're a restaurant owner or a hotelier, those are things that are not part of your everyday business. And so it's a silly example, but it's hopefully it gives you a flavor of the kind of challenges that you face if you want to go on that journey. And so essentially, in order to deliver any kind of IoT digital transformation solution, it ends up requiring a huge number of third-party companies and technologies. And it takes a village, is the phrase that we like to say, or an ecosystem. And these are examples of the kind of skills and resources and products and services that might come into play to deliver just one project for an end user. And an end user could be in any vertical market, but we're thinking of a B2B type solution here. And so our services, our mission here is to help orchestrate these solutions, to get all of these entities, third parties and technologies to really work in harmony, to work together and deliver a solution. We feel it's really important that, first of all, we understand the end user problem. What is it they're trying to achieve, their business outcome that they're looking for? But Arrow's job is not to sell or own the relationship with the end customer directly, but really to bring together all the parts that are needed to be successful. So that's why we talk about orchestrating OT. And Intel think of Arrow as a solution aggregator, which is another way of pointing to the same value that we have. So I just want to spend a couple of minutes diving a bit deeper into the Market Ready Solutions program. So the approach that Intel have taken and that Arrow support, it starts with an end user, a customer in one of these markets that has a problem, a business challenge. And it seems obvious, but it's pretty important that we know what problem we're trying to solve when we build a solution. So that should be the starting point. And our role as Arrow Services is to understand that problem and then start building out solutions. And most often we turn to the technology partners. Arrow is a distributor and a supplier for that represents, these are an example of some of the technology partners that Arrow Services work with, Intel being the largest for us. And so the technology, particularly the hardware and software that we can resell, is the starting point many times. But what's really important when we think about a solution is that it needs some application software. We need something that makes that hardware do something useful. And so I spend a good part of my time looking for and engaging with software companies that specialize, that really understand what end customer pain is about and how to solve that. And that's in every vertical market, but each one of these companies has been chosen as best in class. And we'll work with that company to define a market-ready solution. So all the products that we're building out on are Intel-based. So they come under the Intel program. And a combination of what Arrow can build with our hardware expertise and the services that we wrap around that hardware, along with these software companies, that's what creates a market-ready solution. And it's ready in the sense that end customers can deploy that and they don't need to think about how to build it, how to configure it, how to optimize it. That work has been done. But there's an important piece missing here, and that's because we need a channel. We need specialist system integrators, companies that can meet the requirements of end users with the last mile of services, the domain expertise, the deep industry knowledge that we appreciate and that end users rely upon to bring those solutions and serve the end customers. And so this is how we go to market with the Intel MRS program. And I just want to illustrate that with one simple example. And so I'm showing one of our ISV partners, a company called Biablu, based in Barcelona. Biablu have some digital signage software, but more valuable is they have some analytics expertise that really, to Colin's point about AI, it really takes in data from sensors, from cameras, from the environment of a retail store, and gives the retail end customer insight into what is happening in that bricks and mortar environment. And so we've built out actually more than one hardware solution, from kiosks to media players to back office camera-based analytic solutions. Biablu don't touch the hardware. They don't want to be a hardware company. But we've put together market-ready solutions, and then we take those to market through a number of SI partners. And these are partners that work with us to cover the map for us, so geographic focus, but also different vertical and industry expertise. And they're the guys that help us reach the end users. I've used logos that we all recognize, but we've got small and large retailers and other companies from healthcare as well that are deploying this technology. And so that's, in a nutshell, the way we think about leveraging the power of Intel's technology, combining it with software from partners that we choose carefully together with Intel. But really important is how we then take that to market. And as I mentioned at the beginning, our job is to really help our customers go on a technology journey with as little investment from their side as possible to leverage all this technology without having to develop software, hardware on their own. So this is my last slide. I just want to emphasize that from my point of view, we're really always looking for more solutions. That usually starts once we've identified any customer needs. We're looking for software companies that have something really differentiated and looking to help those software companies scale their business. And we're also always looking for specialist SIs. So if you're a company that is serving the needs of end customers, whether it be in retail, industrial, healthcare, transportation, we'd love to speak with you. So I think I've taken my 10 minutes and I shall hand it back for the panel discussion.
Thanks, Andy. Really appreciate your talk, and thanks for showcasing and bringing to life what is market-ready solution. So when I look at my colleagues, Stephanie and Edwin, they look like two frightened bunnies. So, you know, need to smile and enjoy it. There's nothing to be scared about. Really, so I want to kind of lean in and ask a few questions. Stephanie, if I can engage with you, because I know you've been on the journey with Arrow from the start. Maybe you could share a little more in terms of you know, what Andy was talking about with regard to market-ready solutions, and maybe there's a couple of other examples that you'd like to call out.
No, absolutely, and thanks, Colin, for kind of passing the ball on to me. You saw my face during the calls and how I was engaged, in fact, with Andy's presentation, and it's true. In fact, we have been very close to Arrow on this path because these market-ready solutions actually improve and speed up the time to market. And we see how important it is just at the moment with, for example, in Ireland, Looking at logistics as one example, how critical really a smooth supply chain is for the supply, not only of the country, but also of the collaboration with the neighbors around and so on. And here, in fact, an approach that is not only using the buzzword digital, but kind of leveraging on local expertise and building on the local networks. This is exactly what Andy was talking about in a sense. Let's take these solutions and bring it together. And it's true, in fact, taking the year 2020, which has kind of turned our business models kind of upside down, it put a stronger focus even more on what all needs to happen digital, and looking again at the supply chain, at the retail space, but also at energy. Andy, you had in fact Shell on there, right? So that's from that angle, the manufacturing side, but also for government, or kind of looking at the transportation routes, how much they have become nowadays digital, with the Brexit now happening since a few weeks in only. I think this is kind of really like a proof point to kind of say, in fact, is our talk really something that we are able to work? And yes, and Andy, I wanted to thank you for the collaboration. There, you have already put together a lot of these solutions on your website, and there is even additional help. I heard, in fact, that Microsoft was in the morning on the call, and they also have, in fact, the Intelligent Edge as a collaboration and a promotion of both Microsoft and Intel-based solutions that could be actually scaled through the capacities and capabilities of Arrow.
Super. Thanks, Stephanie. Andy, I just want to ask a question, but I'm going to not ask you immediately. I'm going to come back to you in a minute. But your colleagues this morning were leading with the tagline kind of digitize or die. So perhaps I come back to you and ask you a little bit more about that and what you think about that. Edwin, just bringing you in. I know you've had a lot of focus in the healthcare sector, and you know I'm personally very passionate about that. But perhaps I'd like you to kind of give us some more examples in that particular area, and some of the things that you're seeing as a result of the COVID acceleration, and trying to kind of enable that whole vertical, if you like.
Yeah. So what's happening is like what you can see is like modalities like X-ray or CT or MR, that they produce a lot of images, and radiologists, cardiologists, specialists, they get more and more images to analyze and to help them at the edge, right? So at the modality or at the PACS in the hospital, the inferencing is a very strong development. So if you look worldwide, there are more than 1,000 AI startups in the world. And for example, in Ireland, you have at least like 13 AI startups in healthcare, so to focus on the software inferencing. And they get as well like a lot of funding. So you're talking about funding of like in Ireland, like 40 or 60 million for some of those companies. And to give you some examples, is like when you have a CT and of a patient, and maybe he has a stroke and they are not aware of it. So then this study get like the highest priority for the specialist to say like, hey, please have a look as soon as possible at this study, because this patient might have a stroke. And as you mentioned, like with COVID-19, of course, when you make an X-ray of the chest, that it automatically detect like, hey, this patient has a possible stroke. Sorry, not a stroke. In this case, of course, COVID-19. And so there's all kind of examples are being developed, but also like with digital pathology, which is coming up very strong. You see a lot of developments like that to look into tissues. And what we do as Intel, because what we add is like when they done the training in the cloud of, let's say, like 10,000 images, and sometimes it takes like, for example, 30 seconds. And we have an OpenVINO optimization inference tool. So then instead of like 30 seconds, it only takes like 15 seconds. So that's why we work together with OEMs and also like healthcare AI companies in the world.
Super.
What you're saying, Edwin, is actually that thanks to AI, we are bringing up the relevant information to the doctors in faster time. So that the cases can be prioritized, that the treatment can happen faster, and therefore that also, in fact, the kind of recovery is happening faster than it would be through traditional schemes without the kind of AI and digital help, right?
That's right. And it's not a case of like replacing the radiologist or the specialist. That's not the case. It's just more
No.
like supporting the specialist in the field.
Super. So Andy, as the conductor in this digital, or digitize or die, what else would you bring to us from an Arrow perspective? Because I think that my own view is that there's been a huge transformation in Arrow over the last number of years, and you highlighted the focus of the company at the start, but I think that would be new news still to quite a few people on the call.
Yeah, thank you. And that digitize or die phrase, it sounds a bit dramatic, and it is. And I think Arrow ourselves, we look at ourselves, I'm sure Intel do internally as well, about how we go on that digital transformation journey, and that affects. We've just made a huge capital investment in our logistics hub in Europe, in the Netherlands, which, if you ever get the opportunity to do a tour of that Venlo facility, that's been transformed from what was already pretty leading edge to ahead of even the Amazons of this world in some respects. And so, we have to look at ourselves. When we look at our customers in all markets, I think one thing that's been interesting about these last 12 months is we've seen it accelerate a lot of companies' digital transformation plans. The digital transformation office in most corporations was always screaming for investment, looking for companies to go on that journey, and it was often sidelined as a nice to have. And I think we've seen, particularly retail comes to mind. Retailers that were well set up or have been able to be agile to respond to the online and the kind of needs of customers in the last 12 months have actually thrived. And sadly, the high street has not survived in the same way. And so we're expecting a whole reset of retail. Healthcare, everything talked about, that's got different pressures. They're not going to go out of business. What they're going to see is a need for efficiencies and smarter ways of working. And each industry is facing those dynamics. So digitize or die, well, hopefully most industries will survive, but they'll be transformed. And that's been our observation.
Yeah, it's really interesting to see, especially on the retail side. I mean, the rules in Ireland are kind of click and deliver, right? So it's not even click and collect anymore. And I noticed that even my local village sports shop have moved to that model over the last couple of weeks. So, they are being very quick, and the tools and resources are available to allow people to do that. So I find that fascinating. It's great to see it, as somebody who's in the technology space. Moving back to Stephanie, we were talking about IoT and beyond, the theme of the conference. I mean, what do you see? Like I briefly mentioned and talked a little bit about AI, but what other aspects of technology are you seeing are coming? Perhaps with IoT. What would you comment on there?
Colin, I think this is a great moment to just pull up just one more slide. Sorry, I know, in fact, the audience have seen so many slides during the day, but I think this could be really interesting to everybody to see, in fact, on how we looked at the market and what has happened, especially recently in these kind of post-COVID times. If you'd be just so kind, so I could talk a little bit to that one, and we provide that information as well to the audience.
Yeah, I'm doing that now.
Thank you. Almost done with presenter view. At the moment, it's a split window. Here we go. Yeah, here we go. Perfect. So what you see, in fact, color coded in green, yellow, and white is actually, in fact, how much growing the respective markets are in per use case and per sector. And I can imagine, in fact, our audience is already kind of looking at it and says, well, how can I read it? So what you see, in fact, on the top are actually the kind of different markets. If you are on this call and you have a background in the energy sector, or if you're working for the government, or if you're more looking at the agricultural side, your business has many facets. And it means, in fact, that you may have machines that you would like to monitor, or that you have goods, both in supply as, in fact, in the shipping towards the customers, where you would like to kind of have a logistics tracking. You would like to kind of interact with media on various occasions, may it be for your employees or may it be in fact towards your customer audience and so on. And you may have a specific need for situational monitoring, and I mean that as a help to the processes, because you cannot have people standing around your facilities so much, because we are all limited, right? So we want to take the social distancing in these COVID times. And this is, if you just take this kind of middle line in my chart here, and you see this kind of becoming so increasingly green, this is why, in fact, an investment in that space is going most likely to happen. May it be for the retailers to count, in fact, how many people are entering their stores, or may it be, in fact, for the transportation to understand, in fact, how are the trains occupied, where is a seat available, where can I still kind of go and have my secure space around myself. So these are just examples, and I believe, in fact, this is, as an overview, extremely helpful to really identify as well where will solutions be wanted, where is an active business case for that one, both for the offering, but also for the audience which is interested in investing, and where they can find, in fact, expertise on the inter side. So I think this slide is actually something that should help you with kind of providing exactly that information to our audience.
Super, thanks, Stephanie. Edwin, just come back to you for a second. As a company, we quickly kind of pivoted to put in a pandemic global fund to figure out, how could we help as a company? What innovation could we drive? Maybe it'd be great to for you to call out one or two examples of really innovative ideas that came out of that funding that we helped with some companies.
Yeah, so maybe an interesting one is out of as it's like we have an Irish, it's an Irish conference. It's like Akara, and what they have done, they developed like an UV robotics robot, so it drives through the operating room or through the hallways in hospitals, and then it automates. There's like UV ultraviolet light to clean and to disinfect the hallway, and what it does is, with using AI, is that it will stop sending or spreading the ultraviolet light as soon as a person is in the room. So that's like one of the projects we funded in Ireland. But I think it's like I said, what the example was given at Diablo. It's like it's not only used in like in the retail and the shop, but we use it as well in the hospitals. So like, for example, if you go to the radiology department, it will count the number of persons in the waiting room, and it will give an alert, like it will maybe not open the door until there are like maximum like 25 persons in the room. Just to give like two examples on that.
Super. Thanks, Edwin. Andy, we're getting a question here in the chat window around AI in the future, and will it move to the cloud? I suppose my initial reaction is it has to already be in the cloud, and we have to take advantage of it. But just kind of interested in your view on that one.
Yeah, thank you. And it is a hot topic of conversation. I think we're also a partner with Microsoft and very invested in the cloud conversation as well. The reality is that both are happening, and there are use cases and applications where it makes sense to do AI at the edge, in whether it be for reasons of latency or data size. And then there's also a need to do additional workloads in the cloud. And so a typical mix would be where you might want something in real time. Maybe you're doing a machine vision system. You need to do something right at the machine, very high data rates, and the need for compute at the edge. But if I'm a factory owner with 100 machines around the world, as well as getting that real-time analytics at the edge, I want to look at the big picture. I want to look at data sets from all of my machines, maybe not every frame of every camera, but take that aggregate data and get insight and trends and, to your point, hindsight, those kind of use cases. And so there's a mix in most applications between cloud and edge.
Yeah.
And I would even add to that one, Andy, thanks for making the point. that you need actually an ongoing improvement of your AI processes, where you do in most cases the training and the refining of the models up there in cloud and in data center. But just going back, in fact, to my previous examples of the occupancy tracking and so on, of course, you cannot stream, in fact, the video streams up to the cloud all the time. That would be against, in fact, GDPR and all our concerns, because it's private data and also how people are behaving in the respective areas. So you need to have the intelligence at the edge. And this is exactly where Intel technology is helping with this fast and easy deployment, so that you can actually adjust what you have trained and what your models are looking like to the respective, in fact, edge configuration. Just take the example, if you want to kind of measure people's distance, and if you do this in fuel stations where you have a very small amount of video data and 4 cameras, maybe just enough, you want to have the same intelligence and quality of your AI inference process as if you were doing same on airports. But of course, the infrastructure on airports is obviously different to what you have on a fuel station. But the good thing is that if both run on Intel, you can actually deploy, in fact, your models on either way without a kind of a complete repartitioning of the code, which is a long and difficult path of validation on both sides. And this is actually where we can jointly help on that space.
Super.
Maybe to add as well, and like the edge in the cloud, I think they will in the future they both will be important, because like if you do COVID-19 detection, you can do it at the edge, but you can also send back the image to have, like as Stephanie mentioned, to have like an opt to make the model better and better. But also what you can see, like what happens with GE and Siemens and Philips, like some big players in the market, they have like their AI platform. So if a hospital have like certain cases, like they need an inference model, which they don't use every day, you can upload this image into the cloud and then you get the response back. So you see the combination of like edge and cloud will be very strong, in my opinion, in the future. So thanks for the question.
Super. Another question that's coming in here from the group is, does the panel have any views on constraints of deploying IoT and AI at greater scale? Energy needed, environmental impacts, data storage, other infrastructure requirements. So who would like to perhaps take that?
That's mine. No, actually, so I would like to kind of here walk back on Intel's values overall, and please have a look to the kind of generally available corporate social responsibility of Intel. The report here is not only available, but you can even customize it to your very specific questions. And if I read, in fact, this question again, what comes into mind immediately is, can IT be green? Is it actually something that helps our environment to work with artificial intelligence? And my true belief, it is an absolute yes. Because as I was mentioning, in fact, you would use, in fact, very power efficient, small and little devices to filter actually your information that you're gathering through camera streams and so on, to really the information down what you need. And only that information is transmitted, so you're more efficient on the connectivity side. You are actually more focused in your training. You don't sit on this big pile of unused data. You are kind of limiting it down. And therefore, in fact, also the power consumption that you will have in your data centers and so on is going to be much more tailored to your actual business needs in order to improve it for everybody on the world. And it's not only that kind of pure energy efficiency that is important to us. We all want to kind of live as well in an environment where the culture is inclusive, where we don't pull up walls in between nations, between men and women and everything. We want to be inclusive. And this is exactly, in fact, where we are watching very closely artificial intelligence to have this capability. And Intel has recently amended the contracts for the use of artificial intelligence and all the analytics and the training to make sure that there is no discrimination happening through the intelligence that would be possible around that one. So I'm really kind of pounding the table here. I think we are doing the exact right things. We are doing that with the right priority, and we want to do something that is good for the people everywhere.
Super. Thanks, Stephanie. I'd like to finish with a final question. Andy, I'm going to kind of line you up for this one, which is you talked about the fact that it takes a village to actually bring about these solutions and enable and address the requirements that either consumers or businesses might have. But we've had a great audience on this afternoon, and if you sparked an idea with those people as the conductor of that village, what would your advice be to anybody who's interested and now has an idea or a thought as a result of listening to us today? What would you advise?
Yeah, thank you. Well, it's one of the privileges of my role is the access it gives me to companies large and small, innovators, software, technology. And what strikes me is that it seems obvious, but understand your value, right? And actually, the smallest companies that I deal with are the ones where I see the most innovation. It's a natural thing. But when you're approaching big companies like Intel or Microsoft or Arrow, don't be afraid, right? We need you guys. We need the innovation. We need the startup community and the IP creation. Ireland's a tremendous place for innovation, but we're hungry for that. What we're good at, I think, to speak for Intel here as well, is taking that innovation and turning it into something that's commercially viable and helping companies on that journey. And I think, come forward, step forward with what you have. Make sure you're solving an end user need, right? Technology for technology's sake is just a science project, right? So, yeah. So long as you're solving pain for an end customer, then we're interested, then you've got some value.
Andy, thanks so much. Great advice. Stephanie, thanks a lot. Edwin, thanks a lot. And let me hand back to Gary.
Great. That was a fascinating discussion, guys. And I think it's a great segue into the next workshop starting in 17 minutes time, starting at 2:45. And that's a really great innovator in the medtech sector, connected health, and their story from being very non-traditional technology user to being pioneers. And the story, they're just about to launch their first product globally. So it's a fascinating story. Previously, they'd never worked with technology. Now, 2 years later, they're just about to launch a global product and fix a problem they saw, but they saw nobody solving it. So they went to fix it themselves. So thanks very much. That was a fascinating discussion, and just hand you back now to Kevin. Thank you.
Thank you, Gary, and thank you, Colin, and to all the speakers, Edwin and Stephanie and Andy. Very interesting presentations, great discussion. Thank you for the bit of table thumping, Stephanie. I think we need to hear these messages actually from big tech, because I think it's part of our role to make sure we bring people with us as we try to lead, rather than, as you say, create silos and barriers. We need to make sure that those messages get broadcast and those doubts get dispelled. And obviously those doubts can only be dispelled through persuasion and also through data itself, through demonstrating through data that we are having a positive impact, not a negative one. So with that, I'd like to conclude thanking all our speakers and contributors again. Thank you all for joining us. Special thanks to Arrow for sponsoring this workshop series. Coming up next, as Gary says, at 14:45 is the story of connected health, featuring John Kelly, Julie Cordner, and Ryan Williams. Or you can obviously check out all the other workshops taking place on Beyond IoT on the event website. And don't forget the main stage and research stage also ongoing. So with that, I'd like to say thank you very much again and have a good afternoon.
Great. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.